Fair Game. I'm Kristine Leahy. My guest today is a former MMA fighter and the co-host of the popular podcast, The Fighter and the Kid. He's also a stand-up comedian whose first comedy special debuts on Showtime on May 17th. Brandon Schaub, it is so good to see you.
Yes, good to see you.
First of all, here's where you win. Game of Thrones, one of my favorite shows. Yours too, right?
Favorite show of all time.
Spoilers. What's your take on spoilers for Game of Thrones?
It's such a worldwide, global event. I have to talk about it.
Exactly.
So when people are like, what are you doing, tweeting about it or posting about it? I'm like, everyone's watching.
Right.
There's hundreds of millions of people watching.
Yeah, that's your problem if you haven't watched it yet.
You're obviously not a big enough fan if you're not watching.
Do you know what's crazy though, is it really is, I feel like the last show that you have to watch live. All right, I could talk about Game of Thrones
Me too.
for an hour,
but
we do need to talk about you a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So before you were involved with MMA, you actually played football, right? So you played for the Bills practice squad, arena football. At what point did you decide that football was going to go to the side and you're going to do MMA?
I think football decided that. When I got to when I got to Buffalo, they were like, "We're all set on slow white guys. Thank you for your time." I was like,
no
doubt. Okay, so it's when you're a child, the NFL is like that's Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Then you get there and there's a common theme with everything I've done in my life. Like you get there and you think it's all unicorns and rainbows, and it's a business. It's such a business, and it breaks my heart.
How long did you last with the Bills?
I mean, literally in training camp for a week and a half.
Oh, that's good. I've watched Hard Knocks. Some guys are out of there real fast. You lasted a week and a half.
They didn't know my name. 47 to the left, get out of the shot.
What position?
Tight end.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense that you're a tight end. So you moved back to Colorado and you started boxing. How long before you thought, okay, I'm going to start to make a career out of this?
Especially, leaving football, going to fighting. I don't think anyone, especially at that age, 22, 23, turns to fighting because they have a lot of options. I got done with football. I was very brokenhearted. My partner in crime, Joe Klopfenstein, was playing for the Rams. He was a stud. So I was around that atmosphere and I was training. I needed to find something to do. And I was selling supplements door to door, Pursuit of Happiness. And I don't know, I just kind of fell into it. I fell into it, and I got lucky. And again, a common theme with all these phases of my life that I've been through, you find that, and it's just luck or fate, whatever you want to chalk it up to, is I always had a great mentor. Every door I've stepped into, I've had these great mentors who take me under their wing. So when I started fighting, first day that I walked in the gym, Nate Marquardt's gym in Aurora, Colorado, high altitude, they go, come back tomorrow. We have a big guy who he's starting fighting too. You guys would be good training partners because no one wants to go with a big guy.
Yeah.
So I come back the next day and it's this guy named Shane Carwin, who eventually became the UFC heavyweight champion of the world. So me and him started together, and he was my mentor, and that's kind of how I started.
Were you scared to get hit in the face?
Terrified, terrified. Fighting's not my nature. We don't know each other that long, but I'm not an aggressive guy. I don't have a huge ego. I'm not the toughest guy in the room. I've never wanted to be the toughest guy in the room. Again, with fighting, it was just lack of options. I was really athletic, and it was a way to get somewhere, to fight my way out of what I was going through. So I was always terrified. It's not natural to me to fight people. I would be the guy who would knock someone out or win the fight and then go in the back and damn, are you okay, man? And dude, get out of here. Just knocked me out. I'm I know, I didn't mean to. I hated it.
So when I watch fights, it took me a while to get used to this, but I look at the guy before they're gonna start fighting and it's okay, this guy knows he is about to get really hurt. No matter if you win or lose, most of the time you're gonna get hurt
every time you get hurt.
So you walk in, are you scared every time? Not scared, you know what I'm saying? This is gonna hurt every time.
I think if you sat down with a Nate Diaz, a Conor McGregor, Cain Velasquez, some of these they were born to do that.
Yeah, that's different.
And you talk to them what? No, I'm not scared.
Yeah.
I was put on this earth to fight other dudes. You talk to me, I was terrified.
You were,
I was so scared. I was so scared. I'd sit back in the locker room and just, sometimes it'd be in tears. So I just
Before?
I had all these thoughts going through my head. And I was there has to be a better way to make a living.
Oh my gosh.
This can't be
Every
it.
time.
Every time, every single time.
How did you keep doing it? I would have quit.
Again, I had no option. So it was a way where I was good because I was athletic, but eventually experience, especially in fighting, comes along And these really experienced fighters I was fighting, they've seen the big athletic kid.
Yeah.
So it stopped working for me. And so I don't know. I watch it now and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I cannot believe I did that.
It's scary.
It's terrifying.
How was the experience of The Ultimate Fighter?
I love The Ultimate Fighter.
You
Some
did.
guys complain. I loved it. It was like the first big thing to happen to me. It was, at the time, you gotta realize, at the time, I forget what year that is, but The Ultimate Fighter was The Ultimate Fighter. That was like getting invited to the combine to a draft. Like when you went on The Ultimate Fighter, is the biggest season of all time. Kimbo Slice, Roy Nelson, the Who's Who was on that show. Rampage and Rashad were the coaches. So when I got asked to be on the show, I was so excited because I knew that of 16 guys, all I had to do was focus for those 6 weeks. I didn't care about how to talk to my family or friends. All I had to do was focus for 6 weeks and I'd make a life for myself. So I thrived in that environment. I liked the competition. I didn't like hurting anyone, but I liked knowing that guys were breaking down in the house, and I just knew I'd thrive in that element.
You're mentally tougher.
Yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved Ultimate Fighter.
Do you think that guys ever knew that you didn't want to hurt them? Like that you're a little, I don't want to say soft because that's the worst thing to be called, but you know what I'm saying?
I knew there was something going on because my coaches in practice, like, you got to go harder. I'm like, that, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to hit him like that hard. We're friends. Like, you have to go harder. So, and that was always kind of a theme in my career. It was just, I don't know. I didn't want to hurt people. And you can't, like that, you know what I'm saying? That's that's like selling cars, not wanting to sell cars. Like, that's what we do, man.
Exactly.
It's like Michael Phelps not wanting to get wet. Like, you got to get wet. You got to get wet, man. So for me, it was an issue.
So 2015, you announced that you were going to retire.
Yes.
And get involved with comedy. How'd that happen?
I know.
Did Joe Rogan convince you to do it?
Joe Rogan and Brian Callen, basically. Okay. You know, I was fighting, but I was doing a podcast called The Fighter and the Kid at the time. So Brian Callen, my co-host, actor, comedian, one of the best comedians on planet Earth, me and him would do a podcast together, and it started to gain traction. And he wanted to make it all about fighting. And I went, no, you gotta let me talk about fashion and cars and girls and like a lifestyle show. And he's like, all right, whatever, but still, let's talk about fighting. I'm like, all right, I'll cross that box, but let me do what I wanna do. He's like, all right, fine. And so the show started to get popular, especially at the time. There weren't that many podcasts. And then I remember I was going to Vancouver to fight Andre Arlovsky, who's a legend in the sport, former UFC heavyweight champion. And I'm in the airport, and guys were in the airport were yelling out slogans from the podcast.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I saw one guy at TSA, and he goes, dude, you're not waiting. I love you. I'm like, oh, thanks, man. You gonna watch the fight this weekend? He's like, excuse me? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to Vancouver. Whoa. He's like, for what? And I go, well, how do you know me? He goes, your podcast, man. He goes, I'm part of the Fighting the Kid Army. And I was like, oh my God, this is nuts. So
oh, wow.
It just started to kind of take over. And then I remember I got a check for fighting, you know, for getting beat up. I got my check sitting there, and I got a check from doing podcasts. And it was like God, or if you believe in higher being, was just like, dude, take a hint. Look, man.
The podcast was more.
Yes, what are you doing?
Whoa.
Look at this.
So we already know that you were scared to go into the Octagon every time. Were you scared to go into the comedy clubs?
I shouldn't say scared. I was more scared about what my peers would think, what Rogan, what D'Elia, what Burt Kreischer, Brian Callen would think. I was more trying to impress them. The fans, with people there to see comedy, I get that. I'll get around to them, but I just didn't want these guys to think I couldn't do it. That's all I cared about.
It is time for First and 10. First time you bombed on stage?
First couple of sets at the Comedy Store, I bombed in the belly room in front of all my friends.
Oh.
Yeah, it's tough. That's the way it goes.
First reality competition show you think you could win?
Oh man, not Ninja Warrior. I'm way too big. I'm too big for that.
Yes.
I could do well on those MTV shows, like The Challenge and all that.
Yeah, you could.
Those are just kids from like the real
Bananas.
world. Yeah, I would do well on that.
Kids from the real world. If Banana hears this, he's gonna be very mad.
I don't know Bananas, but anyone named Bananas, bring it. Bring it.
First embarrassing thing you did inside the Octagon?
I mean, getting knocked out is pretty embarrassing.
First boxer you think of when I say overrated?
be a little careful with this, don't I? I'd say Anthony Joshua.
Why? Because he won't fight Deontay?
I'm hoping he hears this and he's like, what? He said that about me, and then fights Wilder.
Well, this could be the
I just think looking at those three monsters in the heavyweight division, I think Joshua with the Wilder Fury is going to have a tougher time. I think he's going to have a tough time.
First Avengers character you'd like to be?
Iron Man. I would pick him because he's richer than all of them, and he still kind of has some. He just has a suit.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's just a suit. He doesn't deal with the demons of like Spider-Man and Hulk and the rest of the crazy ass cast.
Yeah.
He's just a rich dude.
Okay.
Who put together. He's like Elon Musk. He's
Okay.
Elon Musk.
So you want to be?
I want to be Elon
a rich
Musk,
dude.
but
Elon
fight
Musk.
crime.
Got it. First thing you'd do if the purge rules took effect?
Buy a boat and sail.
Just get away from it.
Get
all.
away from it.
You don't want to be part of the
I don't want to
action.
be part of that. No.
Okay.